If you want to die, keep walking. But if you still want to live, get in the damn truck." The voice exploded like a firecracker through the sheets of rain. Rose jerked her head toward the headlights, blinking against the sudden glare. Her hands clenched tighter around the straps of her soggy backpack. The man didn't lean out to help her. He didn't smile. He didn't offer comfort. He just waited like a challenge. She hesitated. She could keep walking into the darkness, pretending she wasn't scared, pretending the chill hadn't reached her bones. Or she could trust a stranger in a battered Ford pickup who looked like he hadn't trusted anyone in a decade. She climbed in. The door slammed shut behind her like a verdict. The heater sputtered on, lukewarm and wheezing, but it was better than the storm outside. The truck smelled of wet leather, oil, and pine air freshener faded long ago. He didn't look at her, just handed over a towel from the seat pocket. "You got a death wish," he muttered, eyes fixed on the road as he shifted gears. "No," she replied, wiping her face, trying not to sound like someone whose whole life was unraveling. "You were 2 bends away from the river. In this weather, you'd be gone before morning." She said nothing. "I'm Victor," he added after a long silence. "Rose." He glanced at her quick, sharp, then back to the road. "You running from something, Rose?" The words hit harder than she expected. Her throat tightened, but she gave no answer. Victor didn't press. He drove like someone who preferred the silence to small talk. The wipers thudded back and forth as thunder cracked in the distance. 15 minutes later, they turned into a gravel driveway. The Nong Tri sat at the edge of the woods, old but sturdy. Warm light spilled from the porch windows like safety. "You'll stay in the back cabin," Victor said. "Dry roof. Hot heater. No questions." Rose nodded. "Thank you." He didn't answer. The cabin was sparse-cut, heater, a folded blanket that smelled faintly of cedar. But it was warm, and for the first time in days, she felt human. She didn't undress. She didn't cry. She just lay down in her wet jeans and boots, stared at the ceiling, and breathed. The knock came at sunrise. "You alive in there?" Victor's voice, blunt but not unkind. She opened the door to the smell of coffee. He handed her a steaming paper cup and a wax-wrapped slice of cornbread. She blinked at him, surprised. "Figured you didn't eat yesterday," he said. "Eat now." They sat on the cabin steps. The farm stretched golden and wide before them, mist lifting off the fields. A red barn stood like a monument to some forgotten war. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent. "You got family?" Victor asked. "Not anymore." He sipped his coffee, watching the land. "I used to work front desk. Hotel in Atlanta. High-end. Fancy. Some woman accused me of stealing her diamond ring. They fired me before checking the cameras. Weeks later, they found Aiton her husband's golf bag. Guess who still had to pay back damages to the hotel's reputation?" Victor didn't blink. "Truth didn't matter," she added. "Not to them. You got anywhere to go?" Rose shook her head. He studied her, jaw tightening. "My mama had a stroke last year. Needs help mobility stuff. Some food prep. Simple care. I can't afford home care. I got the farm to run. You want a roof and a little pay, you can earn it." Rose froze. "She okay with a stranger in the house?" Victor looked away. "She doesn't trust easy, especially after things." She wanted to say no. She wanted to leave before hope took root again. But her account was empty. She needed the money. "I'll do it," she said. Victor stood. "Come inside." The house was old, clean, filled with years of quiet grief. A dog lay under the table. A fireplace crackled in the corner. In the sitting room, an older woman sat near the window. Her back was straight, eyes razor-sharp behind aging glasses, hands folded neatly in a quilted shawl. Victor cleared his throat. "Mama, this is Rose. She'll be helping out." Rose stepped forward, polite. "It's nice to meet you, ma'am." Laverne didn't blink. "Don't ma'am me like we're friends. I know the look of someone running from something. You think I'm too old to see past a smile?" "Mama," Victor warned. She turned her glare to him. "You brought her here. If anything goes missing, don't say I didn't warn you." Rose stood frozen, breath caught. Victor muttered a curse under his breath and turned to Rose. "Come on, I'll show you the kitchen." They walked away from Laverne's stare. Rose didn't speak. "She's not always like that," Victor said. "Just since the stroke, and since my dad died, she got sharp, edged, and—" "It's okay," Rose said quietly. "I've been called worse." He looked at her, and for the first time, his eyes softened. "You don't deserve that." Neither of them said what they were both thinking. "Maybe I do." That night, Rose sat outside the cabin, the sky still heavy with leftover clouds. A single star blinked faint above the trees. She wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, inhaled the scent of pine and distance. Somewhere inside that house, an old woman had already judged her. But the man had given her a chance. If you've ever been judged too fast, or had to prove your worth from zero, give this story a like, and tell us where you're listening from. Who knows, someone near you might be hearing this story too, and needing it just as much. Rose tilted her head to the sky. The clouds hadn't broken, but she stayed anyway. Maybe this time she wouldn't run. Rose stood by the doorway of the kitchen, watching Victor as he poured 2 cups of coffee. He moved with a sort of quiet efficiency that said he didn't like wasting energy, not in words, not in motion. The kitchen was worn but well kept. Everything had a place. The light over the sink flickered slightly when he moved near it, casting strange shadows on the pine walls. "You eat eggs?" he asked without looking up. "Yes," she replied, clutching the sleeves of her sweater. It was still damp from the night before. Victor cracked 2 into a pan. Bacon's already on. The scent had drawn her out of the cabin in the first place. That and the low murmur of voices through the open window. Or rather, one voice, Miss Laverne's, grumbling low and sharp like a blade being honed. Rose had stayed back, not wanting to interrupt, not yet. Victor gestured to the table. She sat slowly, careful not to touch anything that might seem too personal. A cross hung crooked above the back door. Beside it, a photo in a dusty frame, a man in uniform, younger Victor, a woman with gentle eyes standing beside him. Rose didn't ask, she didn't have to. The silence around that photo told a deeper story. "Here." Victor placed a plate in front of her, set his down, and sat across the table. "Eat first, then I'll show you what my mother needs." "Thank you." She took a bite of eggs, perfectly softened, allowed herself a small sigh. "You cook?" Victor raised an eyebrow. "Army. Either cook or starve." "I chose survival." A door creaked from the hallway, heavy, deliberate footsteps. Then Miss Laverne entered, moving slowly with a cane. Her eyes landed on Rose, sharp and steady. "I see you didn't run off in the night," she said, voice sanded down by age and suspicion. Rose stood instinctively. "Good morning, ma'am." Laverne didn't answer. She made her way to the chair by the window, sat down with a grunt, and pulled a knit blanket over her knees. "Don't call me ma'am," she muttered. "Not unless you mean it." Victor cleared his throat. "Mama, Rose is going to help you today. Just light stuff. Start slow." Laverne gave a non-committal grunt. "Long as she keeps her hands off the silverware drawer, I guess I'll live." Rose didn't flinch this time. She simply said, "Understood." The rest of the morning passed in a rhythm of silence and careful steps. Victor showed her the basic show to prepare Miss Laverne's tea just the way she liked it. The exercises the physical therapist had left behind, the pills and the schedule taped to the fridge. "Mama won't let you do everything at first," he warned. "She's proud, stubborn." "So are you," Rose said before she could stop herself. But Victor only smiled faint, brief, and then gone. Later that afternoon, Victor left to check the fences. "Storm last night might have knocked some branches," he said. "Won't be long. You good here?" "Yes," Rose said, though the weight in her stomach tightened. Alone with Laverne? Not ideal. Rose returned to the living room, where Miss Laverne sat dozing in her chair. A book rested on her lap, her hand curled lightly over the spine. Rose cleared her throat softly. "Miss Laverne?" The woman stirred but didn't open her eyes. "Would you like your tea now?" A long pause, then a low mutter. "Only if you don't poison it." Rose didn't laugh. She made the tea precisely as Victor had shown her, black. 1 spoon of honey, no lemon, no milk. When she brought it in, Laverne sniffed it like it might bite her. She sipped, a slow, measured blink. You followed directions, at least." Rose nodded. "I can also help with your exercises. Just 10 minutes, maybe?" Laverne turned her face toward the window. "They say the exercises will help me walk again," she murmured. "They lie a lot." "Ooh." "I won't lie to you," Rose said, kneeling beside her, "but I'll be here if you want to try." Another long pause. Then Laverne turned her head just slightly. "Show me." For 10 quiet minutes, they worked. Rose helped her stretch her legs, move her shoulders, Roll her ankles. Nothing fancy, just motion, just effort. When they finished, Laverne exhaled slowly, eyes closed. Haven't moved that much in a month. You did well, Rose said softly. You're stronger than you think. Laverne didn't reply, but her hands relaxed on the armrest. Rose took that as progress. That evening, Victor returned, smelling of wind and cedar. Fences held, he said, washing his hands in the sink. Nothing busted. Good, Rose said. We did the stretches. He looked up, surprised. She let you? Mostly. She told me not to poison her first, but we got past that. Victor laughed short and sudden, like it surprised even him. It echoed off the kitchen walls. Rose found herself smiling without meaning to. Dinner's on me tomorrow, she said. You cook like a soldier. I'll try not to disappoint. Victor nodded. We eat at 6. No politics at the table. Mama's rule. Fair enough. That night, Rose returned to her cabin feeling a strange kind of calm. She hadn't been yelled at. She hadn't been kicked out. She hadn't stolen or run. For once, she'd simply belonged. If you've ever started over completely, from the ground up just trying to prove you deserve one more shot, give this story a like, and tell us where you're listening from. You never know who out there is walking the same road you just left behind. Inside the farmhouse, Miss Laverne sat by the window, eyes tracing the stars through the glass. She's not what I expected, she whispered to no one. But maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. The next morning came with a soft wind and the scent of wet earth still lingering from the storm. Victor had already left by the time Rose stepped out of the cabin. The sun was just lifting above the treetops, casting long shadows over the fields. The house stood quiet, except for the rhythmic creak of the porch swing swaying in the breeze. She hesitated before knocking, but just as her knuckles reached the wood, the door opened from within. You're early, Miss Laverne said, cane in hand, bathrobe pressed sharp at the collar like she was expecting an inspection. Rose blinked. I thought I'd get a head start. People who start too early usually hide something, Laverne muttered, stepping aside anyway. Coffee's in the pot, don't burn it. Rose moved through the kitchen with a careful grace. The space was beginning to feel less foreign now. She could reach for mugs without double-checking every cabinet. She knew where the honey was, and how much creamer Victor used in his coffee anon. Laverne settled into her chair by the front window, the same one she occupied every morning like a post. She watched the yard, the dirt road beyond, the sky. Rose had learned not to interrupt that ritual. Instead, she brought over a small breakfast tray, set it gently on the table beside her, and stepped back. Eggs, toast, no butter, just the way Victor said you like it. Laverne eyed the plate, then the girl. You trying to bribe me with food? No, ma'am. Just feeding you so you don't faint during stretches. A small puff of air escaped Laverne's lips. Not quite a laugh, but something that hovered near it. Rose took it as a win. They began the exercises a little later than usual. Rose had added a few new movements, gentle ones, suggested by a video she found on Victor's old laptop. She spoke softly as she worked, offering encouragement, sometimes just silence when the old woman's breath got shallow and her fists clenched from pain. You got steady hands, Laverne said at one point. Most people tremble around me. Rose looked up. Why would they? Because I tell the truth. Laverne's eyes narrowed. And people don't like the truth. Rose nodded slowly. No, they don't, but I do. Laverne didn't reply, but her shoulders relaxed. That afternoon, Victor returned with a ladder strapped to the back of the truck and a coil of wire. Storm knocked out part of the barn light. I'll be up top for an hour or two, he told Rose. You need anything, holler loud. I'll be fine, she said. Your mother hasn't threatened to stab me in days. He smirked, adjusted his cap, and disappeared toward the barn. Rose spent the rest of the afternoon folding laundry and reorganizing the medicine cabinet. The house had begun to feel familiar, not home, not yet, but something like it, the kind of place that held memories in the floorboards and whispered stories through cracked picture frames. She was finishing up sweeping the back hallway when she heard Laverne's voice, low and clear. He still thinks it was his fault. Rose turned, broom paused mid-sweep. Who? Laverne didn't turn from the window. His wife. She got sick, wouldn't go to the doctor, said she didn't want to burden him. By the time he forced her to, it was too late. Her fingers tightened around the arms of her chair. She was already gone in her eyes. He carries that like a bullet in his chest. Rose's throat tightened. She stepped closer, quiet. And you? Do you blame him? Laverne looked at her for a long moment, eyes unreadable. Number, I blame life. It's cruel, but not always personal. And that night, Rose brought a plate of leftover chicken and sweet potatoes to Victor, who sat on the porch sharpening a tool with rhythmic strokes. He looked up, surprised. You didn't have to. You've been feeding me for days. Consider it balance. He took the plate, nodded. Smells good. Rose leaned against the porch rail, the night warm and still. Crickets hummed in the distance. Your mother told me about your wife. Victor paused, fork halfway to his mouth. Then he set it down. She did, huh? She didn't say much, just enough to understand why you're quiet. Victor exhaled. I wasn't always like this, but grief, it shifts your bones. You don't stand the same after. I know, Rose said. I lost someone once too, not to death, but it still felt like a funeral. He looked at her, more curiosity than sympathy. What happened? My life, she said simply. It got ripped out from under me. No time to pack, no time to fight, just fall. Oblake. They sat in silence after that. But it wasn't awkward. It felt like a mutual truce had been signed on forged not from words, but from what they didn't say. Before heading back to the cabin, Rose turned. Victor? Yeah? Your mom. She's still sharp, still fighting. Whatever you did to take care of her, it's working. His jaw tensed, then softened. It's not just me anymore. Rose smiled, glad to be of service. And, that night, in her tiny cabin, she curled under the blanket and stared at the ceiling, listening to the distant wind and the creak of the farmhouse settling into night. For once, she didn't feel like she was just passing through. She felt tethered, not trapped, but anchored. Rose closed her eyes. Tomorrow would come, with or without her consent. But tonight, she had earned rest, and that was enough. By the third morning, the scent of the farm had started to stick to Rose's skinny Arthy, warm and faintly metallic, like rust from an old tool left in the rain. She woke early, before the sun cracked open the sky, and moved through her routine with quiet purpose. She no longer hesitated before entering the house. Victor had started leaving the door slightly ajar, as if saying she didn't need to knock anymore. Laverne, however, remained a fortress. The older woman sat in her usual place by the front window, shawl wrapped tight, hands resting on a quilted blanket that hadn't moved from her lap since day one. She watched the driveway like a sentry on high alert. Her eyes narrowed as Rose entered the kitchen. You're early, she remarked, not lifting her gaze from the window. I don't sleep much, Rose answered, filling the kettle. Guilt will do that, Laverne replied, voice calm but piercing. Rose paused for just a beat, then turned the burner on. So will knowing you've got work to do. They didn't speak again until the tea was poured and placed gently on the tray next to Laverne's chair. Rose had learned the rhythm by now. The silence before the first sip, the critical sniff, the slow not approval disguised as apathy. Today, though, Laverne surprised her. Victor told you about her, didn't he? Rose didn't ask who. She already knew. Only a little. He loved her, Laverne said flatly. More than anything, more than himself. And when she got sick, he couldn't save her. That kind of failure lives in a man's bones, turns them brittle. Rose didn't respond. She felt like she was being tested, but she wasn't sure what answer would pass. He needs someone, Laverne continued, but he'll never admit it. Pride keeps men lonely. And guilt, Rose added softly. Laverne looked at her then, really looked. What are you guilty of, girl? Rose hesitated, then sat in the chair across from her, folding her hands in her lap. Letting people define me, letting a lie cost me everything. And what'd you do after? Ran, she said, until I ended up here. The front door creaked open suddenly, and Victor stepped in, boots muddy, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Fence posts split by the back creek. I need to run into town for supplies, he said. You okay holding down the fort? We're fine, Laverne replied before Rose could. She's got a good head on her shoulders, a little wounded, but still sharp. Victor raised a brow. High praise, Laverne snorted. Don't get used to it. Rose watched the interaction quietly, noting the flicker in Victor's expression gratitude buried beneath his usual stoicism. He nodded to Rose. Need anything from town? I'm good, she said. But maybe, if you pass by the library, see if they have a book on post-stroke nutrition. His lips twitched, almost a smile. "Will do." And with that, he was gone, truck rumbling down the road like thunder leaving the sky. For the next few hours, Rose focused on the daily therapy. Laverne was less resistant now, even if her sarcasm remained intact. "You ever think about becoming a nurse?" the old woman asked between leg lifts. "Used to think about a lot of things," Rose answered, adjusting the pillow behind Laverne's back. "Now I just try to make it to the end of the day with some dignity left." Laverne grunted. "That's all any of us are doing." They paused for a water break, and as Rose cleaned up the cups, she noticed something on the sideboard she hadn't before: an old photo in a tarnished frame. It showed a younger Laverne and Victor, both in military uniforms, standing proudly beside a man with kind eyes and a crooked grin. "Your husband?" Rose asked gently. Laverne's eyes flicked over. "My Daniel. He was the backbone of this place. Died in his sleep, heart gave out while I was folding laundry. I never finished that load." Rose's chest tightened. "I'm sorry." "Don't be," Laverne said. "He died whole. Most people don't get that luxury." End Ori. That evening, Victor returned with a bag of supplies and a worn paperback tucked under his arm. He handed it to Rose without a word, "Nutrition After Stroke" printed in faded letters. "Thank you," she said, holding the book like something fragile. He shrugged, figured it couldn't hurt. Dinner was quieter than usual, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Laverne even made a comment about Rose's cornbread being less dry than yesterday, which, from her, was practically a standing ovation. After dishes, Rose stepped onto the porch with a mug of tea. The night air was thick with crickets and the occasional bark of a far-off dog. Victor joined her, leaning against the porch post. "She talked to you much today?" he asked. "A little." "That's more than most get." Rose glanced at him. "You ever think about leaving this place?" Victor's gaze didn't move from the darkened horizon. "All the time. But then I look at her, and I remember some roots don't let go easy. Even when the ground's cracked?" "Especially then," he said. "Cracks let the water in, keeps things alive." They sat in silence for a moment longer. Rose wrapped her hands around her mug, the warmth grounding her. "You think I'll ever outrun what happened to me?" she asked quietly. Victor turned to her then, voice steady. "Maybe you don't have to outrun it. Maybe you just have to outgrow it." Her throat tightened. The words landed heavy. "True." Rose finished her tea and stood. "Good night, Victor." "Night, Rose," he said, voice low. As she walked back to her cabin, she felt it again, that subtle shift in the air, like something had cracked open just wide enough to let a little light in. The day started like any other dew hanging in the air, the quiet hum of the fields waking slowly beneath a sky streaked with soft orange. Rose had begun to fall into the rhythm of the place. Morning coffee by 7, Laverne's stretches by 9, chores in between. The land didn't rush. It breathed with the steadiness of something ancient and patient, and Rose had found a strange comfort in that. She was drying dishes when she heard the sharp thud upstairs. It wasn't loud, but it was sudden off-beat from the usual creaks and groans of the house. She dropped the towel and ran. "Miss Laverne," she called, taking the stairs 2 at a time. No answer. When she reached the hallway, she saw the edge of a cane on the floor just outside the bathroom door. "Miss Laverne." She knelt beside her. The older woman was on her side, eyes open but glassy, breathing fast. "I slipped," she muttered, voice strained. "Stupid. Shouldn't we?" "Don't talk," Rose said firmly, checking for blood. No sign of injury, but her wrist looked twisted, and her pride Rose could feel it was shattered. "We're getting you up slowly, okay?" "Don't call Victor," Laverne growled. "Don't you dare." "I won't, not yet, but we've got to move." Deep breath on 3. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't quick, but inch by inch, Rose helped her to sit against the wall. She fetched a towel, water, and wrapped Laverne's wrist gently. "You need ice," she said, "and maybe an X-ray." "I need a damn better brain," Laverne snapped, wincing. "I knew the tile was slick. I knew. You're allowed to make mistakes. Not when you're me." That one sentence sat heavy between them. Rose helped her back to her chair downstairs, made her tea with trembling hands. Laverne held the cup like it was the only solid thing left. Her silence wasn't cold, it was shame, and Rose recognized it too well. Later, Victor returned, fresh dirt on his boots, a bag of seed over one shoulder. He took one look at Rose's face and knew something had happened. "What's wrong?" "She fell," Rose said quietly. Upstairs, bathroom floor. Victor swore under his breath, dropped the seat on the porch with a dull thud. Is she okay? Sprained wrist, maybe. No swelling yet. She's resting now. He ran a hand down his face. Damn, I should have replaced that flooring months ago. She didn't want you to know, Rose added. You should have called me. She asked me not to. Begged, really. Victor exhaled, shoulders heavy. She's proud, too proud. It wasn't pride, Rose said, meeting his eyes. It was fear, of becoming a burden, of being helpless. That night, the air inside the house was tight. Victor made soup but didn't eat much. Laverne barely touched hers. Rose cleaned in silence, then stepped outside for air. The stars were brilliant, unobstructed by city lights or noise. She stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself, until the creak of the door behind her told her she wasn't alone. She's not angry at you, Victor said, joining her. She's angry at herself. I know, Rose replied. I've been her. Victor leaned on the railing. When my wife started getting sick, she hid it, pushed through. Wouldn't see a doctor, said it was just fatigue. By the time I dragged her in, the cancer had already spread. Rose turned, watching his face in profile. You think that was your fault? I don't think, he said. I know. You didn't cause it. I didn't stop it either. They stood in silence, broken only by the wind sliding through the trees. You're a good son, Rose said finally. And a good man. Victor didn't answer, but his jaw unclenched, just slightly. The next morning, Laverne didn't sit in her usual window chair. She stayed in bed, wrist wrapped, blanket pulled to her chin. Rose brought her breakfast and sat nearby, unsure whether to speak. You stayed, Laverne said quietly. After I barked, after I blamed. Yes, Rose answered. Why? Because I don't leave people when they fall. I've been on the floor too many times to do that to someone else. Laverne looked at her. You know what I thought when Victor brought you home? That I was trouble, Rose said. That I'd steal the silver. Number? I thought, here we go again. Another woman with soft eyes and too much pain in her voice. I thought he was setting himself up to be broken again. And now? Now I think maybe you're the first person who might actually understand what he's made of. Rose swallowed. The words landed deep. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me, Laverne said. Just don't run. That afternoon, Victor patched the bathroom floor while Rose read aloud from the book he'd brought home. Laverne listened with eyes closed, mouth twitching at some of the more clinical advice. They make it sound so easy, she muttered once, like healing's just a checklist. Maybe it is, Rose replied. Just a long one. As evening came, Rose stepped into the barn to find Victor oiling a hinge on the stable door. She told me not to run, she said softly. Victor didn't look up. She doesn't say that to people. I don't plan to. Good. He straightened, wiped his hands on a rag, and finally turned. You're doing more for her than you know. She's doing more for me, too. They stood there, among the scent of hay and leather and old tools, a silence blooming between them that didn't need to be filled. That night, Rose stood by the cabin window and watched the porch light flicker in the distance. It didn't matter how many times she'd fallen in the past. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to stand. The morning light slid across the kitchen floor in long golden ribbons. Rose was already at the stove, flipping cornbread in a skillet that hissed faintly. The house was unusually quiet, even by Walker Farm standards. No footsteps from upstairs, no familiar creak of Laverne's chair near the window. Victor had taken the truck into town early to pick up supplies, which left Rose alone with her thoughts and with the growing sense that something was shifting beneath the surface, something subtle but undeniable. Laverne emerged just before breakfast was plated. She wore a soft gray sweater Rose hadn't seen before, the sleeves pulled down over her bandaged wrist. Her steps were slower but more purposeful, and when she entered the kitchen, she didn't glare, didn't question. She just nodded once and eased herself into the chair at the table. Rose placed a plate in front of her, said nothing, and joined her across the table with her own coffee. The silence between them wasn't tense anymore. It was something else, mutual understanding, or maybe the early murmur of trust. You're not a bad cook, Laverne said finally. I was half convinced that cornbread yesterday was a fluke. Rose gave a small smile. I learned fast. You don't survive hospitality without feeding someone angry. Angry people don't want food, Laverne muttered, taking a bite. They want to be seen. That landed harder than expected. Rose stirred her coffee, glancing out the window. "You think Victor's still angry?" "He's not angry," Laverne said. "He's tired. Tired of carrying ghosts that should have stayed buried." "Do you think I remind him of her?" Rose asked before she could stop herself. Laverne chewed thoughtfully. "Maybe at first. But now? You're something else. He talks softer when you're in the room." "That's new." Rose didn't reply, but her heart beat a little quicker. It wasn't a romantic flutter, not yet. It was deeper, like something recognizing itself in another person's shadow. After breakfast, they moved to the living room for Laverne's exercises. Rose had added a few new stretch-a-slow, deliberate movements, guided by instinct and quiet research. Laverne didn't complain as much as usual. At one point, she even chuckled as Rose exaggerated emotion just to lighten the mood. "You'd have made a good drill sergeant," she said, breathless. "That's the first compliment you've given me," Rose replied, teasing. "Don't get used to it." Laverne shot back, but there was warmth in her voice. When the session ended, Laverne sat back, eyes closed, hand resting over her chest. "You know," she said softly, "I haven't felt this strong since before the stroke." Rose sat beside her. "That's because you haven't given up. Or maybe because someone finally made me believe I shouldn't." Rose swallowed the lump in her throat. She didn't need to ask what Laverne meant. She already knew. Victor returned mid-afternoon, toolbox in hand, sweat on his brow, and a fresh bag of dog food slung over his shoulder. Ellie, the family's old collie, barked and danced around him as if he'd been gone for weeks. Rose stood on the porch, watching him unload supplies. "Busy day?" she asked. "Had to wrestle with a fence panel that didn't want to stay put," he said. "Lost that round, but I'll get it tomorrow." "I think your mother's coming around," Rose said. "She almost smiled today." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Did you bribe her?" "Nope. She even said I wasn't completely useless." "Damn," he muttered, half laughing. "She must really like you." "I think she respects me," Rose replied. "Which is scarier, honestly." That evening, they all sat on the porch together, something that hadn't happened before. The late summer sky burned gold and lavender. Ellie lay curled between Victor's boots. Laverne had a blanket draped over her legs and a faint smile tucked into the corner of her mouth. Rose held a glass of iced tea, her fingers tapping the rim absently. "You ever think about selling this place?" she asked Victor, almost casually. He didn't answer right away. His gaze swept the field, the barn, the old silo standing like a sentinel against the sky. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I think about what it took to keep it. My father, my grandfather, the war, the debt, and I can't bring myself to let it go." "Even if it hurts to hold on?" Rose asked. Victor turned to her then, eyes unreadable. "Some things are worth the pain, because they carry your name and your history." Later that night, Rose stood at the sink, washing the last few dishes. Laverne sat nearby, peeling an apple with her good hand. The silence was companionable. Rose glanced at her. "You think Victor's healing?" "He's starting to," Laverne replied. "But it's slow. He's been bleeding for years. You can't just stitch that up with kindness. You need time, and the right hands." "You think I'm the right hands?" "You haven't run yet," Laverne said. "That counts for something." When Rose returned to her cabin that night, she didn't feel like a guest anymore. She felt like a piece of the land, stitched into the rhythm of the place. And as she closed the door behind her, the wind carried the faintest echo of laughter, real, warm, and entirely human. Maybe this was what healing sounded like. The morning began with a kind of peace that felt earned. The light slipped through the kitchen window just right, catching the edge of Rose's teacup as she sat with Laverne at the table, reading aloud from an old paperback they'd found buried beneath a stack of crossword books. Victor had gone into town again, something about ordering new hinges and repairing a feed trough. The absence of his boots on the floor, the weight of his voice in the house, it was noticeable now, in a way that Rose wasn't sure how to name. Laverne had been calmer these past few days. She even joked once, lightly, about the birds outside being too nosy, watching her through the window like gossipy neighbors. Rose laughed, genuinely, and thought how strange and beautiful it was that a woman who had once looked at her like a stain now shared apples and silence in equal measure. But peace, she'd learned, rarely stayed long without asking for something in return. It started with the sound of tires on gravel, not Victor's truck, not the mail carrier. Something heavier, slower, unfamiliar. Rose peeked through the curtains and saw a dark green sedan pull up near the barn. The door creaked open and a man stepped out, tall, thick-shouldered, wearing a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled high. He had a slouch to his walk, but not from weakness, from arrogance, the kind bred over years of pushing others aside to get what he wanted. Laverne's chair creaked as she rose slightly, peering through the window. Her face changed instantly, eyes sharp, jaw set. "Damn it," she muttered. "What is it?" Rose asked, stepping beside her. "Jerome," Laverne said. "Victor's cousin, and bad news." The name lingered in the air like a bitter taste. Jerome knocked without waiting long. Then he opened the screen door himself and stepped inside as if he owned the place. "Well, well," he said, voice syrup, thick with condescension. "Didn't expect to find a new face around here." Rose stood straighter. "You need something?" "Just visiting family," Jerome said with a smirk. "Ain't that allowed anymore?" Laverne didn't smile. "Family visits with respect. You come here looking for something." "I came to talk to Victor," Jerome said. "But I suppose I could chat with the help first." Rose didn't flinch. "He's not here, and if you're done insulting people, the door's behind you." Jerome tilted his head, studying her. "Got fire in you. I like that." "I don't care," Rose replied. Victor's truck rolled up just then, tires crunching with purpose. He stepped out slow, measured, eyes immediately landing on Jerome. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Nice to see you too, cousin," Jerome replied. "Heard through the grapevine you've been running this place all on your own. Thought I'd come see how much is left before the bank takes it." "This land's not yours," Victor said, voice low but solid. "Never was." "Could have been," Jerome shot back. "If your daddy wasn't so quick to cut me out." "You did that yourself," Laverne snapped from the doorway. "Drugs, jail, and lies." Jerome chuckled. "People change." "Not you," Victor said. "Not ever." Rose stood beside Victor now, her presence calm but unwavering. Jerome noticed. "She's got you wrapped, huh? That's cute." Victor didn't rise to it. "You said what you came to say. Now leave." Jerome stared at him for a long moment, smile fading. "This land's worth more than you think, and if you think I won't fight for my share, think again." "You had your share," Victor said. "You sold it for a bottle and a busted car." "Things change," Jerome said again. Then he turned and walked out, slamming the screen door behind him. They watched the dust rise behind his car as he drove off. The quiet afterward was heavy, like the calm after a punch. Victor finally spoke. "I'm sorry." "For what?" Rose asked. "He's not your fault." "He's a reminder," Victor said, "of everything I'm trying not to become." "You're nothing like him," she said. "You've built something real here. He just wants to tear it down." Later that night, the three of them sat in the living room, the old radio humming a blues song low in the background. Laverne spoke first. "He'll be back." "Let him," Victor said. "He can't take what doesn't belong to him." "He'll try," Rose added. "That's what men like him do. They push until something gives." Victor nodded slowly. "Then we don't give." That night, Rose stayed up late, staring out her cabin window toward the dark silhouette of the barn. The land felt different now, like something had stirred beneath its surface. She wasn't afraid, but she was awake, and sometimes that was even harder. By midweek, the tension had grown roots. It clung to the edges of the barn, sat heavy on the porch swing that no one touched anymore, and crept into every quiet moment between sentences. Rose felt it most when the wind stopped moving, like the land itself was holding its breath. Victor hadn't spoken much since Jerome's visit. He worked longer hours outside, hammering fence posts with more force than necessary, feeding the animals before dawn and staying out in the fields until well past sunset. It was as if he was trying to outrun something that didn't have legs but lived in every corner of this place. Rose didn't push him. She knew that kind of silence. She'd worn it before. One morning, just before sunrise, she went out to the barn to find him standing over a broken beam. His hands were calloused, his shirt soaked with sweat. He looked up when he heard her steps. "I didn't sleep," he said simply. "I figured. He'll come back," Victor added. "And next time, it won't be just words." Rose looked around, noting the overturned bucket, the tools scattered like forgotten thoughts. "Then we prepare." "For what?" "For war. For truth," she said. "For justice." "You're not alone in this." He stared at her for a beat too long, like he wanted to say something more, something deep, but the words never surfaced. He just nodded and returned to the broken beam. That afternoon, they discovered the message. Rose had gone out to the far fence line with Ellie at her side when she saw it, a piece of plywood nailed to the gate, spray-painted in red "Get out." Beneath it, fresh tire marks, cigarette butts still warm in the dirt. She stood there, pulse thudding, until Victor arrived in the truck, his jaw tight as he read the sign. "He's escalating," Rose said. "Yeah, we should call the sheriff." Victor let out a dry laugh. "He's been drinking with Jerome since high school. You think he'll help?" "Then we gather proof," Rose said. "We document everything. He wants to intimidate. Let's show him we don't scare easy." When they returned to the house, Laverne was waiting on the porch, eyes like iron. "I saw the sign," she said. "You two going to pretend it didn't happen?" "We're handling it," Victor replied. "Handling it how? With silence?" Laverne's voice rose. "That man's not just a pest, Victor, he's poison. He sees cracks and pours himself right into them." Rose stepped forward. "We're not ignoring it. We're building a case, step by step." Laverne's gaze shifted to her, and for once, there was no sarcasm in her tone. "Good, because I'm tired of watching this land suffer under the weight of secrets." That evening, they walked the property together, Victor, Rose, and Laverne in her wheelchair, wrapped in a thick shawl. They noted damage, took photos, recorded voice memos. Rose created a folder on Victor's laptop labeled Defense. It was slow work, but it gave them something to do besides worry. Afterward, they sat in the living room, lights dimmed, old jazz playing softly on the radio. Laverne sipped her tea, and Victor cleaned a rifle in the corner, not as a threat, but like a ritual of memory. "You ever think about leaving?" Rose asked quietly. "Selling everything? Starting new?" Victor didn't look up. "Every time I patch a fence, but my daddy's voice keeps me here. He planted every tree with his bare hands. And every time I leave, it feels like I'm betraying him." "Your father was a good man," Laverne said, "and he'd understand if you had to go." "But I don't want to go," Victor said. "I want to stay. I just want to do it without looking over my shoulder." That night, long after the house fell silent, Rose sat on her cabin steps, staring into the dark. The stars blinked above like quiet witnesses. She pulled her sweater tight and whispered, "He's not going to break us." The wind answered in soft rustles through the trees. And somewhere far off, maybe in town, maybe already back near the edge of the woods, Jerome was waiting. But so were they. Rose rose slowly, turned off the porch light, and closed the door behind her. The cabin exhaled around her like an old friend. Tonight they'd stood together, and tomorrow they'd do it again. The morning brought no thunder, no red spray-painted threats, no fresh tire marks clawed into the earth, just fog. Thick, white, and heavy, it rolled over Walker Farm like a secret, softening the edges of the world. Rose stood on the porch with her arms crossed, breathing it in. For the first time in days, the silence felt earned again. Victor joined her with 2 mugs of coffee, handing one to her wordlessly. They stood shoulder to shoulder, watching as the fields slowly emerged from the mist like waking giants. "I think he's waiting," Victor said finally. "Waiting for what?" Rose asked. "For us to flinch," he said, "or run." She nodded. "He'll be disappointed." Inside, Laverne had stayed in bed longer than usual. When Rose entered with her usual morning tea, the old woman was sitting up, blanket across her lap, hands clasped tight. There was something about her posture more alert, more aware. "Morning," Rose greeted gently. "Tea as requested. 1 spoon honey, no lemon, and if I got that wrong, please wait to scold me until I've had my own caffeine." Laverne didn't respond right away. She took the cup, stared at it for a moment, then looked up. Her mouth moved, barely. At first, Rose thought it was a twitch, a whisper. Then she realized Laverne was trying to speak. "What is it?" Rose asked, stepping closer. "Something wrong?" Laverne's lips shaped a sound again. Her throat moved. Then, slowly, like a rusty hinge surrendering to oil, a word broke free. "Ellie." It was hoarse, breathy, but clear. Rose froze. "You said Ellie?" Laverne blinked rapidly, eyes watering. She nodded, jaw trembling. "Ellie," she whispered again. "My girl." Rose reached for her hand, clasped it gently. That's your first word since the stroke, isn't it? Laverne nodded once, and a tear rolled silently down her cheek. She loved this porch, Laverne said, clearer now, though her voice cracked like brittle wood. She used to dance barefoot in the rain, little curls bouncing. Rose didn't press. She just sat beside her, hand still in hers, letting the memory settle between them like a prayer. Victor returned from the barn an hour later, his shirt dusted with hay. He stepped into the kitchen and stopped short when he saw the look on Rose's face. "What is it?" "Your mom," Rose said. She spoke. He dropped the feed bag on the counter. "What?" she said, Ellie, clear as day. He blinked. "Are you serious? Come see." They entered the room together. Laverne was still upright, her tea finished, her eyes calmer than they'd been in weeks. "Mama?" Victor asked gently. She looked up at him and reached out her hand. "Victor," she whispered. He moved to her side, kneeling, eyes suddenly glassy. "You remember everything?" "Not everything," she said, "but I remember enough." She placed her palm against his cheek, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. It was the first time Rose had seen Victor look like a son, not a soldier, not a farmer, just a son, kneeling beside the woman who raised him, letting himself be held. Later, after the moment had softened into the background and Laverne had fallen into a peaceful nap, Rose sat with Victor on the porch. "It's coming back," she said. Her strength, her voice. "It's because of you," he said. "She trusts you." "She's stronger than both of us put together," Rose replied. "I just reminded her of that." Victor turned to her. "You reminded me too." She looked down at her hands, trying to ignore the warmth rising in her cheeks. "She said Ellie," she said again, voice quieter. "Your daughter." "Yeah," he said, "my daughter, and my wife. Same name, different souls." Rose turned sharply. "Wait, your wife was Ellie too?" He nodded. "She named our girl after herself, said it was vain but funny. She had this laugh." He trailed off, eyes going far. "I still hear it sometimes in the wind." Rose placed a hand on his. "I think she'd be proud of this place, of you." Victor looked at her then, and for a brief second, it felt like the fog lifted againly, this time inside his eyes. That night, the house was full of something more powerful than noise. Hope. Laverne sat in her chair near the window, humming softly, barely audible but steady. Victor cooked. Rose cleaned. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't cinematic. But it was real, raw, the kind of peace that people bled years to find. As the stars rose, Victor handed Rose a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" she asked. "A list," he said. "Supplies, numbers, contacts. I started putting it together today, just in case." "In case of what?" "Jerome," he said. "We don't wait anymore, we prepare." She unfolded the paper. Everything was listed, photos taken, times recorded, names of the two neighbors who'd offered to testify if needed. "You're building a case," she said. "We are," he corrected. "Together." Later that night, Rose stood alone in the cabin, watching the porch light flicker. She whispered Ellie's name once, just to feel the weight of it. And in the silence that followed, she didn't feel alone. She felt part of something that mattered, something worth protecting, something worth staying for. It was a Thursday when the knock came, not heavy, not hurried, just a polite, deliberate tapping at the front door that sent a chill through Rose's spine. She had just finished folding laundry and was walking through the hall when she heard it. Victor was outside working on the tractor, and Laverne was upstairs resting after a longer than usual morning session. Rose wiped her hands on her jeans and opened the door. Standing there was a woman in her mid-50s, tall, with sharp gray eyes, and a neat blazer that didn't belong anywhere near a farm. She held a leather satchel and a clipboard. "Rose Whitman?" she asked. Rose hesitated. Her instincts kicked in suspicion, defense, the old reflex of running, but she didn't move. "Yes. Who's asking?" "Carla Brennan," the woman said, extending a hand. "I represent the Corporate Compliance Division for the Lexington Grand Hotel." Rose didn't take the hand. She stared. "Why are you here?" "May I come in?" Carla asked, glancing around. "This won't take long." Rose stepped aside warily, leading her to the kitchen. "Talk," she said. Carla set her satchel down and removed a manila envelope. "There's been an internal review," she began, "concerning the allegations made against you last year. The ring in question misses. Edgerton was, as you know, eventually discovered in her husband's luggage. Until now, Our position remained that due process had been followed and the matter closed. However, she paused. New testimony has emerged. A member of the housekeeping team confessed that Mrs. Edgerton had intentionally planted the accusation to distract from an extramarital affair. It was a cover story. Rose's mouth opened slightly, but no words came. Her heart pounded. "I'm here to deliver this," Carla continued, sliding the envelope across the table. "It's a formal apology, along with a reinstatement offer and compensation package. We'd like to offer you your position back, with back pay." Rose stared at the envelope like it might burn her fingers. "You want me to come back?" "We'd be honored," Carla said. "Your record was exemplary. We'd hate to lose someone of your integrity." Rose finally sat down, slowly, as if gravity had changed. "You ruined my life," she whispered. "Your hotel, your silence, your system. I lost everything. You want to fix that with a letter and a job?" Carla's face tightened. "Miss Whitman, I understand how you feel, but this is the most we can do now." "No," Rose said, louder. "No, you don't understand. You didn't see my face when the security guard led me out. You didn't hear the whispers. You weren't the one walking out into the cold with no paycheck, no reputation, and no place to go." Carla shifted. "Then tell me what you want." Rose stood. "I want you to leave, and I want you to know that I'm not the same person you tried to erase." Victor had entered quietly, unnoticed, during the last few minutes. Now he stepped forward. "You heard the lady," he said. "Doors that way." Carla gathered her papers quickly, nodding once, and left without another word. Rose stood there for a long moment, staring at the envelope still on the table. Victor walked over and picked it up. "You want me to burn this?" She shook her head. "Number, I want to keep it. Not because I'll go back, but because it's proof I wasn't crazy." "You were never crazy," he said. "They just made you feel like you were." Rose looked at him then, her voice softer. "You believe me?" "I always did," Victor said. "You never acted like someone hiding guilt. You acted like someone carrying a weight that didn't belong to them." That night, she sat with Laverne on the porch. The older woman listened silently as Rose explained what had happened. When she finished, Laverne just nodded. "You're not going back, are you?" "No," Rose said. "I don't think that place deserves me anymore." "Good," Laverne replied. "This porch suits you better. You think so?" "I know so. People like us, we don't belong in places that don't see us. We belong where we're felt." Henry. The moon was rising when Ellie, the dog, padded up beside them and rested her head on Rose's knee. She stroked the soft fur absent-mindedly. "Do you think I wasted my time there? All those years, all that effort?" "No," Laverne said. "You proved you were loyal, even to people who didn't deserve it. That says more about you than it does about them." Victor came out then, carrying a folded blanket. He draped it over Rose's shoulders without a word and sat beside her. "We've got more to build," he said simply. "You in?" Rose looked at him, and the corner of her mouth lifted. "I'm in." Inside the house, the envelope sat on the counter, unopened. It wasn't a doorway anymore, just a piece of paper. Outside, the stars blinked above three people who had weathered more than most and were still standing. And this time, they were standing together. The next few days were strangely quiet, like the air had thickened with the weight of something yet to come. Victor fixed the gutter on the east side of the barn, and Rose spent hours organizing receipts, photos, and the notes they'd compiled since Jerome's first visit. Laverne, sharper and steadier now, insisted on being included in every conversation. "I might not move like I used to," she said, tapping her cane on the floor, "but my brain still runs laps around most people. They were building something legal, something solid. And for the first time in a long time, Rose felt like her hands weren't just cleaning up someone else's mess. They were preparing to defend something that mattered. Victor brought the box down from the attic that afternoon. It was old, cedar wood, and heavy with dust. "Dad kept everything," he muttered as he set it on the kitchen table. "Bills, deeds, letters from the war hell. There's probably a birthday card in here from 1959. Rose smiled faintly, brushing dust from the lid. "We might find a treasure." They began sorting through it together, Laverne supervising from her chair like a general commanding her troops. Old land plots, faded photographs, hand-drawn maps. And then, at the very bottom, folded neatly in a plastic sleeve, a set of documents that made Victor pause. "What is it?" Rose asked. He pulled them out, unfolded them carefully. "It's the original land deed, with my grandfather's seal and my father's will notarized." He read it again, slower. "He left the property solely to me, and had it registered with the county 3 months before he passed." Laverne leaned forward. "That's the one I told him to keep separate. Said Jerome would challenge it someday." "Well, here it is," Victor said. "Signed, sealed, and waiting." Rose exhaled. "We just found the foundation of our case." They took the documents to Mr. Halpern, the only lawyer within a 20-mile radius who still wore a tie every day. He adjusted his glasses, examined the papers slowly, then leaned back in his chair with a satisfied sigh. "This is solid," he said. "It proves full legal ownership. If Jerome tries anything, this deed shuts it down, instantly." Victor nodded. "What about protecting the place long-term?" "You could put it in a trust," Halpern said, "or add a secondary name to the deed for legal clarity." Victor glanced at Rose. "Secondary name? If you trust someone enough," the lawyer added. "It helps with taxes, future claims, makes the land safer." Rose blinked. "Wait, you're not thinking." "Why not?" Victor said quietly. "You've been here. You've worked it. You've defended it. You've kept this place together as much as I have." "Victor," she said, overwhelmed, "I'm not family." "Family's not always blood," Laverne said, her voice suddenly firm behind them. "Sometimes it's the ones who show up when it matters." Rose turned to her, unsure what to say. "You trust me that much?" "You saved my son's life in more ways than one," Laverne replied. "You've earned a place here." Halpern began preparing the forms that same day. Victor's name first, then Rose's, 2 signatures on the paper, not out of charity, but out of mutual respect, out of survival, out of something more profound than either of them was ready to name out loud. When they returned to the farm, the sun was beginning to set. The fields were golden, the sky painted in wide strokes of pink and orange. Ellie, the dog, met them by the fence, tail wagging as if she sensed the shift in energy. Rose stood at the edge of the porch and looked out over the land. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's ours," Victor said. That night, they sat around the kitchen table with mugs of tea and a fire crackling in the old stone fireplace. The papers were tucked in a drawer, but the reality of them settled over the room like a warm blanket. "I never thought I'd see my name on something that meant stability," Rose said. "For most of my life, my name was just a liability, a rumor, a cautionary tale. Now it's part of a legacy," Victor said, "something no one can take from you." "Or from you," she replied. "This place, your father's work, it's in good hands." Laverne raised her mug slightly. "To earned ground," Rose smiled, clinking her cup gently against theirs. "To new names on old land." Later, when the stars returned and the house quieted again, Rose stood by her cabin window with the paperwork still fresh in her hands. She traced her name on the bottom line, the ink now dry. For the first time, it didn't feel like she was signing a temporary shelter. It felt like she was signing a promise, and this time, she had every intention of keeping it. The town hall smelled like old varnish and pine dust, the kind that clung to your clothes and stayed in your lungs long after you left. It was a small building, tucked between the feed store and the county clerk's office, with warped floorboards and a chalkboard behind the podium that hadn't been used since the Carter administration. Still, tonight, it was packed. Word had spread that Victor Walker was bringing Papers Reel 1 sand, that Jerome had called for a formal review of the family land ownership. The irony, Rose thought, was that no one really cared about the truth until someone tried to bury it. Then suddenly, everyone wanted a front row seat. Victor stood tall near the front, papers tucked neatly under his arm, his flannel shirt pressed, boots clean for once. Rose sat beside him, calm but watchful, her own copy of the deed in her bag. Laverne had insisted on coming too, against everyone's advice. "I won't let my name be left out of the room where it all ends," she'd said, and no one dared argue. So now she sat near the aisle, wrapped in a navy shawl, eyes sharper than any lawyer in the building. Jerome was already there, leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, a smug little smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He was dressed better than usual collared shirt, no visible beer stain, but Rose could still smell the arrogance on him from across the room. When the county moderator called the meeting to order, the The room settled into a hush that buzzed with anticipation. "We're here to address a petition for review regarding the Walker family estate," the moderator began. "Specifically, land ownership and rights transfer. Mr. Jerome Walker has submitted a claim suggesting incomplete or invalid transfer of said property." Jerome stepped forward, clearing his throat dramatically. "It's simple," he said. "The land's been in the Walker name for generations. I'm blood. I deserve my share. Victor's been playing landlord for too long with no real claim." Victor didn't flinch. He stepped forward and placed the papers on the table. "Here's the original deed, notarized. Here's my father's will, also notarized, signed, and witnessed by 2 locals who are both here tonight. The land was left solely to me, and 3 days ago, I added a secondary owner, Rose Whitman, for additional security. She's earned it." A murmur swept through the crowd. Jerome's smirk faltered. "You just added her?" he sneered. "What's she got to do with anything?" "She's protected this land when others tried to harm it," Victor said, his voice steady. "She's worked it, defended it, and stood with us. That makes her part of it." "She's not even family," Jerome shot back. "She's an outsider. You think people like her get to own land around here?" The room tensed. Rose stood, slow and deliberate. Her voice didn't rise, but it carried. "You're right. I'm not family by blood, but I've lived here. I've cared for this family. I've cleaned the wounds your kind of silence caused. I've been accused of things I didn't do, and I've stayed. That's more than you can say." She paused, letting the words settle. "So if land belongs to those who love it, I've earned every acre." A few heads nodded. Even the moderator looked a little stunned. Then Laverne's voice rang out, brittle but clear. "I've watched that boy Jeromely since he could form a sentence. He's not here for heritage, he's here for money. He'd sell this land to the highest bidder within a week. My husband knew that. That's why he left it all to Victor." She turned toward the crowd. "And if any of you think that man deserves more than the dirt under his fingernails, you haven't been paying attention." The moderator took a breath, shuffled the papers, and tapped the gavel gently. "After reviewing the evidence and testimony, there's no basis to challenge the deed or ownership. This matter is closed, officially." Jerome cursed under his breath and stormed out of the building, knocking over a chair on his way out. No one followed. No one stopped him. Outside, the air was crisp and clear. Victor stood beside the steps, hands on his hips, exhaling like he'd been holding his breath for 10 years. Rose joined him. "It's over," she said. "For now," he replied, "but he'll always circle. People like him don't know how to let go." "Let him circle," she said. "We're rooted." Laverne came out next, flanked by 2 neighbors who helped her down the stairs. "You 2 did good," she said. "Your father would have been proud. That means everything," Victor said, his voice tight. "It should," Laverne said, "because now this place has your name on it in more ways than one." That night, back at the house, Rose lit a single candle in the windowsill. She didn't know why. Maybe it was for Ellie, maybe for Victor's father, maybe just a sign to the world that the light was still on, and they were still here. She watched it flicker, steady and small, but unwavering, just like them. The rain returned 3 nights after the town meeting, not with fury but with quiet persistence, like a whisper of everything that had passed. It tapped against the tin roof of the cabin and rolled down the windows in slow streams. Rose stood at her front door, one hand resting on the frame, watching the fields blur into shades of silver and shadow. The porch light glowed behind her, casting long, soft shadows, and inside, a kettle hummed low on the stove. It wasn't the same kind of storm she had walked into weeks ago. That one had threatened to swallow her. This one felt like a baptism. Victor appeared in the rain like a memory, his jacket soaked through, his boots splashing through puddles as he crossed the yard without hesitation. Rose didn't move. She just watched him come, step by step, until he reached her porch. He paused, eyes locking on hers. She stepped aside, wordlessly, letting him in. He shook off his coat, water pooling at his feet, and stood by the stove, hands outstretched toward the warmth. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly. "Didn't try," he said. "Rain makes me restless." "Me too," she said, "but it feels different this time." He nodded. "Yeah, like it's washing something off instead of drowning it." She poured 2 mugs of tea and handed him one, their fingers brushing just briefly. They stood in silence, sipping, listening to the rain patter against the cabin's tin roof. "You ever think about how much has changed?" she asked after a while. "Since the first night?" Victor looked at her over the rim of his mug. "I think about it every day. I think about what might have happened if I hadn't stopped the truck, or if you'd kept walking." "I was going to," Rose admitted. "I had no plan, just legs and a storm and a kind of desperation that didn't know where to go." "And now?" he asked. She looked down at her hands. "Now I feel like I stopped falling." Victor set his mug down and stepped closer. "I've been angry for a long time," he said. "At the world, at myself, at time, for taking people I couldn't live without. But you reminded me what it's like to let go of that without feeling weak." Rose's breath caught. "I didn't do anything special." "You stayed," he said. "That's special." End 14. They sat on the couch, the cabin bathed in the soft glow of the porch light and the occasional flicker of lightning in the distance. "Your mom called me family yesterday," Rose said. "She did," Victor confirmed. "She meant it." "I never thought I'd find that again," Rose whispered. "Not after everything." "You didn't find it," he said. "You built it, brick by damn brick." There was a knock at the door. Both of them stiffened for a split second, instinctive tension rippling through the room. Victor stood and opened it slowly. But it wasn't Jerome. It was little Ellie, hair damp from the rain, a drawing clutched in one hand. "I wanted to show Rose," she said. "I made this." She stepped inside, barefoot and smiling, and handed the paper to Rose. It was a crayon drawing of the house, the barn, the field, and the three of them standing under the porch light holding hands. "That's you," Ellie said proudly. "You belong here now." Rose felt her throat close up. She crouched and hugged Ellie gently, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "This means more than you know." Victor placed a hand on his daughter's head. "All right, Munchkin, time for bed." Ellie nodded and skipped back to the main house, her footsteps light and certain. Victor turned back to Rose. "You're part of this family now," he said. "Not just on paper, in everything that counts." "I know," she said, voice thick with emotion. "And I'm not leaving." The rain slowed to a mist. Rose and Victor stood at the porch, side by side, watching the land drink in the sky. "It's just water," she said. "It doesn't hurt anymore." "No," Victor agreed. "Now it heals." They didn't say anything else. They didn't have to. Because some stories don't end with loud declarations or dramatic farewells. Sometimes they end with quiet rain, warm light, and the soft certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Sometimes the people we least expect, those who arrive in the middle of our storms, end up being the ones who teach us how to stand again. Love, trust, and belonging are not always found in grand gestures, but in quiet moments of kindness, loyalty, and the courage to stay.